May 20th, 1916, at a whaling station on South Georgia Island, suddenly 3 men are seen who were believed to be dead long ago. Their beards were quite big, their clothes were torn, and their faces were black due to cold and sun. The condition was so bad that no one present there could recognize them. How do you recognize? Because these 3 people were found dead 532 days ago, is he Jagos. 25 companions boarded a ship and set out to explore Antarctica, the coldest and most dangerous place in the world. Their dream was to reach the coast of the Weddell Sea and cross the entire Antarctica on foot. That is, a feat that no one had ever done before. But the snowy world of Antarctica has changed everything. Soon they started taking such a test that no one had even imagined. In a few months, the ice sheets in the Weddell Sea became so thick that their ship got stuck in the snow, and one day it got stuck in the depths of the sea in front of their eyes. In this way, 28 people were stuck in the coldest and most desolate area in the world, surrounded by silence like snow, storm, and death. During such dangerous times, they had to stay on floating ice for months. In just a few moments, they ran out of food and water, and to survive they had to take such decisions that even thinking about them, their souls trembled. To save their lives, they had to bring back dogs with them. This story is not just about an expedition, but it is a story of human courage, leadership, and survival to the extent that the distance between life and death is just as much as a wrong step every day. So let's go on a journey where death was at every turn, and where the world's greatest survival story began, which proved that when a person refuses to give up, the world refuses to give up. Then the most difficult conditions also bow down in front of it. Antarctica, located on the south pole of the Earth, is one of the 7 continents of this Earth, which is the coldest and toughest place on this Earth. This area surrounded by the Antarctic Ocean is almost completely covered with snow. The cold here is so dangerous that in many places the temperature goes below -50 degrees Celsius. And the snow all over the place makes it an almost impossible place for humans. But this danger created excitement in some people. Such was an Anglo-Irish explorer, Ernest Shackleton, whose dream of reaching Antarctica in his mind was like a passion. He tried to reach Antarctica in 1901, but due to very bad weather and difficult conditions, he had to return about 750 kilometers before. He reached 2,000 kilometers in 1907. But this time too he had to return only 150 kilometers from Antarctica. Although it was considered the farthest south record of that time, due to which Ernest Shackleton became very popular, and he was honored with the title of Knight by King Edward VII of the United Kingdom, after which he began to be called Sir Ernest Shackleton. But even so much the restlessness in him, and the reluctance to reach Antarctica did not let him sleep peacefully. In such a way, in 1913, Sir Ernest Shackleton again made a plan for the Antarctica expedition, which was named Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. He announced that this time he would not only reach Antarctica, but he would cross the entire Antarctica on foot. His plan was that his ship would first reach South Georgia Island and then cross the Weddell Sea from there. While crossing, he will go to Vassal Bay on the coast of Antarctica, after which he and his team will cross the entire Antarctica by walking through the South Pole to reach Ross Sea. After this, Ernest Shackleton bought a Norwegian-made ship through fundraising for this journey, named Endurance. Endurance was a 3-masted sailing ship, but to speed it up, a coal-fired steam engine was also installed in it. And this ship could also make way between light pack ice. After this, Shackleton, the description of this newspaper was men wanted for hazardous journey. It was clearly stated you had to face strong cold, snowstorms, and darkness for months, and no guarantee of going home. But crossing this dangerous expense, there are 5,000 applications in the world, and Ernest Shackleton chooses only 27 of them. Sailors, carpenters, Navy officers, doctors, and engineers were included in his chosen crew. In addition, there were 6 scientists among these 27 people who were going to do scientific research in Antarctica. But this mission was as great as it was dangerous. In that era, GPS, satellite navigation, or modern communication was nothing. The guess of direction and distance was 100% wrong. It was used only with instruments like maps and sextant. A small mistake could have led them to the wrong direction by deviating hundreds of kilometers. In the meantime, World War I had also started in the world. But despite this, Ernest Shackleton did not back down from the mission. Endurance was finally defeated. On August 8, 1914, England departs from Plymouth. However, the real journey began when the ship reached South Georgia Island after a journey of about 3 months. This was the last human settlement before Antarctica. The Norwegian sailors living here warned Shackleton that this year the sea ice is much thicker and more dangerous than before. That's why they called this expedition a human settlement. But Shackleton decided to move forward. After that, on December 5, 1914, the ship Endurance leaves the stormy seas from the whaling station in South Georgia and departs for the world's most dangerous and mysterious continent, Antarctica. This ship is called the Shackleton. On the ship, apart from Sir Ernest Shackleton, there were 27 crew, 69 dogs, and a cat rider. In addition to this, the food and drink of the ship, food, safety instruments, and 3 lifeboats were also kept. The dogs were kept on the snow to pull the luggage. The mission command, where Sir Ernest Shackleton was in the hands, was in the role of Frank Wild, second in command. The captain of Frank Worsley, while the responsibility of the visual record of the expedition was on photographer-cameraman Frank Hurley. Partly a few days later, Endurance enters the Weddell Sea, one of the most dangerous sea areas in the world. Clouds were in the sky, and there was no sign of the sun. But despite this, the atmosphere of the ship was very pleasant, and the crew members were busy laughing at each other. From here, they started a journey that was full of romance and danger, and was going to become a survival story that had neither been heard nor seen before. Weddell Sea is a marine area, which is surrounded by Antarctica on 3 sides. For this reason, there are thick layers of snow on the sea floor. Only 2 days after leaving the whaling station, Endurance started getting stuck in pieces of ice from all sides, which reduced its speed. As the days went by, the snow kept getting thicker. As a result, only 9 days after leaving South Georgia Island, Endurance started getting stuck in pieces of ice from all sides. On December 14th, the ship 24 hours, but no one has lost hope. Shackleton was hoping that this snow would be lost in a few days. It happened as he had thought. And about 8 days later, on December 22nd, the snow on the road begins to melt. After that, the ship moves forward again, and for the next 2 weeks, the ship continues to move towards the south. Soon, on January 10th, 1996, the ship sank. The ship reached near the coast of Antarctica, and its destination was only 100 kilometers away. On January 15th, Endurance reached a place where the sea ice was looking very strong. The crew thought that if needed, it can be climbed on the ice and walked ahead. But Shackleton thought that his real landing point, Vassal Bay, is still in the south. That's why he took Endurance to the south. But in reality, they were quite close to their objective. Shackleton had miscalculated their position, a mistake that would soon turn his and his crew's lives into a living hell. This miscalculation steered the ship into an area of even denser ice. Meanwhile, by the evening of January 17th, the weather took a sudden turn for the worse. Strong winds drove the ship off course, and the Endurance began to drift slowly toward the northeast. About 23 kilometers away from its place, and the layers of snow began to thicken again. Now the situation was that when the wind was blowing, the ship was drifting in the wrong direction, and when the weather was calm, the snow would stop it. This went on for many days, and finally on February 14th, Shackleton shut down the engine of the ship to save coal and ordered the crew to cut the snow and make way. Everyone tried to cut the snow for many days, but the road could not be made and the snow could not be cut. The ice was constantly taking the ship into its grip. Now Antarctica was going to have a long, dark winter, So Shackleton was worried that if the ship was stuck here, he would have to spend the whole winter in the ice. In winters, the sun is not visible here for months. The ice thickens and its pressure could break the ship. But knowing everything, Shackleton could not do anything. The ship was stuck in the ice, and the open sea was far away. Finally, on February 24th, 1915, Shackleton decided to stop trying to move forward and spend the whole winter here. All the dogs were removed from the ship and shifted to the dog loose made of ice, and the interior part of the ship was made suitable for winter. Shackleton had a miracle in this area 3 years ago, when the ship of explorer Wilhelm Filchner arrived in this area. Shackleton, too, began to wait in the hope of just such a miracle, and to ensure that the team's morale did not waver during this period, he organized a variety of activities for everyone, including moonlight walks for the crew. There were small plays and games on the ship, and races of dogs were also done so that everyone's mind was engaged and no one's courage was broken. About 6-7 months passed like this, but despite this, instead of improving the situation, it started to get worse. The ice around the ship's endurance started to crack and put pressure on it. Meanwhile, one day, a huge pile of ice from the surrounding area collided with the ship, causing a loud noise there, and the endurance broke from many places. There were many big holes in the back of the ship. That Ernest Shackleton had to take the most difficult decision. He ordered that the ship should be emptied because staying on that sinking ship for too long could have cost him his life. After this, all the necessary items and 3 lifeboats were removed from the ship. Shackleton gave a clear order that every man will take only as many things as necessary to stay alive, and everything else had to be left behind. In a short while, 28 people were standing on the ice. In front of them was the endless silence spread all over, and behind them was their ship, Endurance, which was now slowly sinking into the ice. Standing in the middle of the sea on that desolate snowy field, for these 28 people, the world had suddenly ended, and there was no hope of help from far and wide. There was only ice all around. Hill Island or Robertson WHA Station. On October 30th, 1915, Shackleton ordered his team to move forward. But the situation was much more difficult than he expected. Even after 3 days of hard work, he was only able to move 2 miles ahead of the difficulty. It was very difficult to walk on the snow pulling lifeboats, luggage and dogs. It was almost impossible. Shackleton had to decide to stop after losing the fatigue, and he asked the crew to make a camp on a strong floating ice. After this, everyone together made a camp on the big pieces of ice, which was named Ocean Camp. He was just a short distance away from the drowning Endurance, so sometimes he used to bring important things from there. But on November 21st, 1915, the moment finally came when Endurance sank completely under the ice in the depths of the Weddell Sea. Endurance sank completely under the ice in the depths of the Weddell Sea. Shackleton and his crew's eyes were filled by seeing this horrific scene. The ship that had brought them to the end of the world had now disappeared in front of them. Now they had only one floating ice sheet support on which their camp was built. In the beginning, the flow of that piece of ice was so slow that it was not even felt. But by the end of November, its speed increased to about 11 kilometers per hour. But still, it was going to take a lot of time for them to reach a land area. So in the 4th week of December, it was decided that they would now try to walk towards Paulet Island. On December 23rd, leaving the ocean camp, everyone starts walking towards Paulet Island. But the conditions were very difficult. Despite the hard work, they are able to move only 12 kilometers ahead while pulling heavy goods and 3 lifeboats on the snow. In the end, they have to stop again and walk on another strong road. Everyone has to build a camp on this time he calls a patience camp. But now the real problem had started in front of him. Food rations were decreasing rapidly. Everyone used to get a biscuit, some cocoa, and some high-fat meat paste throughout the day. Sometimes they used to hunt seal and penguins, but this often did not happen. There was so little water in the body that everyone were etched, and my throat was so dry that they were having a hard time eating. His throat had become so dry that he found it difficult even to swallow food. At this point, Shackleton ordered everyone to eat raw seal meat so that it is easier to get the food out of his blood. The situation got so bad that he killed the dogs he brought along with him. Dog meat was now an important part of their food. Leaving the ship, they had been out for about 6 months, and by the end of March 1916, their life was saved. The crew began to notice some mountains, but the worst part was that they had drifted in the reverse direction of the Paulet Island, because the wind kept changing direction. So the ice sheet was flowing somewhere there and somewhere else. Nature was testing them every moment, to prevent them from returning to their original position. Shackleton was forced to change his target. First he thought that he could reach Clarence Island, then there was a hope of reaching King George Island, but finally it was decided that he would go to Elephant Island. According to Shackleton, Elephant Island and King George Island are the world. His current position was about 160 kilometers northwest, and the piece of ice was also constantly flowing in the same direction for many days. In a few days, this distance was reduced to only 50 kilometers. But during this time, another danger came up. The piece of ice on which his camp was, it was getting thinner rapidly and could break at any time. Captain Frank Worsley 80 hours. Many people were sick due to hunger and dirty water, and more than half of the people were mentally broken and lost their courage. But all the people who were healthy, they kept running the boats. In this way, after pedaling for 7 days in a row, they reached Elephant Island on April 16, 1916. About 5 years later, there was solid ground under their feet. The island was deserted. It was cold and barren, where maybe a ship used to come. But still, at that time, this place was no less than a heaven for them. But the truth was that it was almost impossible to stay alive here for many days because there was almost nothing to eat on this island. The human settlement closest to Elephant Island was at least 960 kilometers away. Cape Horn of South America and Falkland Islands were at this distance, while South Georgia Island, where the main expedition of the trip was about 1,300 kilometers. There were Cape Horn and Falkland Islands Pass, but the only way to get there, from one of the most dangerous coastal roads of the world, goes through Drake's Passage. To pass through here was equal to going into the mouth of death. 12 meters high waves rise here, and more than 20,000 sailors had lost their lives here. Shackleton decided that he would try to go to South Georgia Island. But the problem was that most of the crew was so bad that it was very risky to take them so far by lifeboat. So Shackleton decides that he will go to South Georgia Island with a small team of only 6 people and will return to Elephant Island to rescue his companions by taking help from there. In this way, 22 people were going to camp on Elephant Island and wait for Shackleton. Shackleton took care of the team to stay there. Responsibility to Frank Wild, who had previously been on many of his expeditions. After completing all the preparations, on April 24, 1916, Shackleton and his 5 companions Frank Worsley, Tom Crean, Harry McNish, John Vincent and Timothy McCarthy board a small lifeboat and set off for South Georgia Island on the way to Scotia Sea. The plan was that they would sail for 4 hours and rest for 4 hours. But the waves of the sea were so dangerous that many times the water in the boat broke. For the next 16 days, he was constantly struggling with the vast and dangerous waves of the sea and the fast stormy winds. Sometimes he would remove the water from the boat. Sometimes he would remove the frozen ice in it. Finally, one day he saw South Georgia Island from a distance. Now he was only 5 kilometers away from it. The crew was completely tired and they did not even have the strength to hit the paddle. That's why they left the paddle. It seemed as if they had lost everything. I don't know if you noticed, but after 17 days of this dangerous journey, Sir Shackleton and his 5 companions finally reach on the west coast of South Georgia. Reaching the shore, there was no place for their happiness, and they hugged each other out of joy. They thought their biggest fight is over, but when they realized their correct location, the happiness disappeared in a moment. He had reached the wrong side of the island, where there was no human settlement. Here humans lived on the opposite side, where there were whaling stations. But to reach there, he had to cross about 40 kilometers of snowy mountains and glaciers. At that time, his condition was such that he could not even climb a step. So he decided to rest for a while. He hunted seals and other sea creatures nearby, so that some power could return. Because they were waiting for the most difficult walk of the story. The mountains of South Georgia Island were so dangerous that no man had ever crossed them on foot before. But Shackleton and his companions now had no other way. Even after 9 days of rest, Harry McNish, John Vincent, and Timothy McCarthy could not recover. So on May 19, 1916, in 2016, Ernest Shackleton left him there and started climbing thousands of feet high mountains with Frank Worsley and Tom Crean. The biggest difficulty was that he did not know the right way. So whatever mountain was visible in front of him, he would climb it. If there were deep pits somewhere, the walls of some straight rocks would stop the way. When there was no way to go ahead, he would get down and then try to climb some other mountain. Even after hours of trying, he was not able to find the right direction. After about 24 hours, he was able to reach the top of the mountain. Transparency across the whole country. Transparency across the whole country. Transparency across the whole country. And from a distance, the sound of the whistle of the wind coming from the stormless whaling station was heard. This was the first time in the last 2 years when he had heard the sound of a human activity. This made him believe that he was going in the right direction. After walking for a few more hours, the three of them reached the whaling station by noon. He was completely tired because he had been descending from the mountains for 36 hours in a row. This was the island from which 532 days ago he had left for Antarctica, and now fate had brought him back there. But when he reached the whaling station, no man present there could recognize him. All three had grown a lot of beard, their faces had turned black, and their clothes had torn badly. Seeing him, the manager of the whaling station asked in surprise, "Who the hell are you?" Then Ernest Shackleton replied slowly, "My name is Shackleton." Everyone is surprised to hear this because so far the world had agreed that Ernest Shackleton and his entire team is dead. But today 3 of them were standing alive in front of him. After this, the manager of the whaling station immediately gave food to all 3, gave new clothes and a bed to sleep so that after such a long time they could get some rest. Although Ernest Shackleton had reached South Georgia Island with his 2 companions, but thinking about the 22 crew members of the whaling station, his heart sank. And then he got stuck on Elephant Island and started trying to save his crew. On May 23, 1916, he made his first rescue attempt and left for Elephant Island on a whaling boat. But the sea ice that spread in the sea blocked the way and he had to return. After that, he reached Falkland Islands and started preparing for the second attempt. On June 10, 1916, the second rescue attempt was made, but this time the ice walls did not allow the ship to move forward. On July 12, 1916, the second rescue attempt was made, but this time the sea ice did not allow the ship to move forward. Second, they attempted to take a moped called the ambulance on the Elephant Island driver Helpwood, and he tried to reach the Elephant Island. But this time again, he failed badly. He had tried until now, but he failed to do so. Shackleton was not willing to move away from that. While looking for a way to rescue these men, he looked for another appointment opportunity this time. Chile's government asked for help, which gave him a steam tug named Yelcho. On August 25, 1916, Shackleton left for Elephant Island for the 4th time. There, Frank Wild had built a hostel for his companions on Elephant Island. He had made a small shelter from 2 inverted ships and stones. Whenever the crew's morale began to break, Frank Wild would say the same thing. "Dear backpack friends, the boss can come today." But the days changed in weeks and weeks changed in months, but their boss did not return. In this way, they had spent 4 months on Elephant Island, and they had started to believe that the boat might have sunk on the way and their boss would never be able to come back. Desperate, they decided to take a lifeboat and head for an island. But just before leaving Elephant Island, on August 30th, 1916, they suddenly spotted a ship in the distance, heading towards them. At first, no one believed it, but after a while, it became clear that the ship belonged to their boss, Ernest Shackleton. Within a few hours, Shackleton was standing among his companions. He was astonished to see that 22 of his companions were still alive and well on a desolate and deserted island, even after 128 days. Tears of joy filled everyone's eyes. Some were hugging each other, others were sharing their experiences. Ernest Shackleton put everyone on board that same day, and on September 3, 1916, they all safely reached Punta Arenas, Chile. After nearly 2 years of battling ice, storms, and high seas, the expedition finally ended. Shackleton set out with 27 people, and returned with only 27. Nearly 106 years later, 10,000 feet below, the ship Endurance was also discovered, whose wreck is still safe in the sea today. On January 5, 1922, Sir Ernest Shackleton was bid farewell to the world at the age of 47. He had set out to take Antarctica on foot, but could not complete his real mission. Still, in history, his name is such a leader in the form of Dars, who in impossible circumstances also brought back his every companion alive. This is why Shackleton's survival story is still alive today,